Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are standing at the foot of something massive. And I don't mean a mountain, and I don't mean a skyscraper. I mean a cathedral, but not one made of stone and glass. We are looking at a cathedral of thought.
That is a very, very apt metaphor. And frankly, it's one that the history of philosophy has pretty much assigned to this specific work.
It has to be.
We are looking at the Summa Theologica, or more formally, the Summa Theology by Saint Thomas Aquinas.
It feels like the ultimate deep dive. I mean, we're talking about a text that has defined Western theology for, 700, 800 years?
Yeah.
And I have to admit, looking at the stack of sources we have for this, the Summa itself, specifically part 1, the commentaries on its structure, thoughts from Cardinal Newman, St. Augustine, St. Josemaria Escrivá, it's intimidating.
It is.
It feels like I'm trying to read the source code of the universe.
It is intimidating. And honestly, it should be. You're looking at over 500 questions, thousands of articles, and an attempt to summarize literally everything.
Everything.
God, man, the universe, morality, psychology, law, and how it all fits together. It really is an encyclopedia of existence.
But here's the thing, and this is what completely threw me for a loop when I started reading the background material.
Okay.
You would think a book this dense, this massive, was written for the absolute elite, right? The super geniuses of the medieval world.
Postdocs,
Yeah, the PhD candidates of the 13th century, exactly.
You would think so.
But Aquinas explicitly says in the beginning he wrote it for beginners.
That is the great irony of the Summa. It's almost a joke.
Beginners. I mean, I consider myself a reasonably intelligent person, but I opened up to question 3 on divine simplicity and felt like my brain was melting. If this is for beginners, what on earth were the experts reading?
Well, you have to understand the context.
Yeah.
When he says beginners, he doesn't mean, children or people off the street.
Right.
He means theology students who are just starting their formal training.
Yeah.
But yes, he literally says he wants to cure their boredom.
Boredom. That seems like such an odd word choice for a 3,000-page book on the nature of reality.
The Latin word is fastidium. It means boredom, yes, but it also carries this sense of aversion, disgust, or confusion.
Oh.
It's that feeling you get when you're so overwhelmed by disorganized information that you just want to quit.
I know that feeling. That's the too many tabs open in my browser feeling.
Yeah, exactly. That is the perfect modern analogy. So our mission today is to take this massive medieval text, strip away that intimidation factor, and see if we can understand this blueprint for the universe.
Okay.
We want to see how Aquinas organized the chaos of his time into something logical, structured, and, dare I say, maybe even readable.
All right, let's unpack that chaos bit first. Because when I think of the Middle Ages, I think of, monks copying manuscripts in silence. Very orderly, very slow.
Yeah, that's the stereotype.
But the university scene in Paris in the 1200s, it was apparently a mess.
Incredibly chaotic. Yeah. You have to imagine being a student of theology back then. You didn't have a single clean textbook. You had the Bible, of course, which they called the Sacra Pagina, the sacred page.
Right.
But then you had centuries of commentaries, debates, questions, arguments that had just piled up.
So it's not one book, it's a library of conflicting opinions.
A library, and a disorganized one at that. One of our sources mentions a book called the Liber Sententiarum.
Yes, the Book of Sentences by Peter Lombard.
That was the standard textbook for about a century before Aquinas.
Yeah.
And it was. Well, you use the word library. Imagine a scrapbook.
A scrapbook?
A massive, massive compilation of quotes from the church fathers, opinions, arguments. It's just Augustine says this here, but Jerome says that over there, and Ambrose says this other thing.
So it's a collection of sources with no real structure.
Very little. It was repetitive. It jumped around. The introduction to the Spanish Dominican edition we looked at describes the state of theology before the Summa as being overwhelmed by the multiplication of useless questions, articles, and arguments.
Useless questions? Does that mean, like, the whole how many angels can dance on the head of a pin thing? Was that real?
Well, that specific one is more of a caricature that came later. But the spirit of it is right. They would get bogged down in these incredibly obscure technical debates that had lost all connection to the big picture.
Okay.
It was information overload. It sounds so modern, doesn't it?
It really does. It's like doom scrolling through theological debates on what we'd call social media today. You just get lost in the weeds. People arguing about tiny details without seeing how any of it connects.
And the students were confused. They were suffering from that fastidium. They were discouraged by the repetition and the complete lack of order.
So Aquinas sees this.
He enters this scene as a teacher, He was a master of the sacred page at the University of Paris, and he decides, I need to clean this up. He wanted to be the architect who turned that pile of bricks into a building.
He was the original curator, the great organizer.
Precisely. In his prologue, which is famous in its own right, he lays out his 3 goals. He's very clear about it.
Okay, what are they?
Brevitas, globalitas, et ordo.
Brevity, wholeness, and order.
Exactly.
I have to stop you on brevity. I mean, come on. The thing's enormous. How can he claim brevity with a straight face?
It's relative brevity, mind you.
Okay, fair enough.
Compared to the endless winding commentaries on the sentences that went nowhere, Aquinas was cutting straight to the bone. He cuts out the fluff. He doesn't go on these long, rambling tangents.
So it's dense, but it's not bloated.
Exactly. But the most important word there is ordo. Order. He wanted to present the sacred doctrina, the sacred doctrine, according to the ordo disciplinae.
The order of the discipline.
Right. Not just following the chronological order of the Bible Genesis to Revelation, and not just following the random order of debates that popped up in the classroom. He wanted a structural, logical progression from first principles.
And this is where we get into the architecture. We called it a cathedral earlier, but there is a specific shape to this cathedral, isn't there?
There is.
It's not just a list of topics. It's not like Wikipedia.
No, it's a circle. And this is absolutely essential for the listener to grasp. If you get lost in the Summa, it's usually because you've lost sight of where you are on the circle.
Okay, walk us through the circle.
It follows a grand schema known as Exodus and Reditus.
Latin for exit and return.
Yes. The Exodus is the flowing out, the procession. All things come from God. That is the exit.
So God is the starting point.
The starting and ending point. The Reditus is the return. All things, specifically rational creatures like us, must return to God. It's a journey out and a journey home.
So if we look at the table of contents of the Summa, how does that map out? Part 1 is the Exodus.
Correct. Part 1 focuses on God himself, who he is, his existence, the Trinity, and then the procession of all creatures from him.
So creation.
Creation, angels, the physical universe, man, it all flows out from the source. You could think of it as the downward slope of the circle from the creator into the created world.
And then part 2, that's the return journey.
Part 2 is the bottom of the circle, turning back up. This is the Reditus, the return. And interestingly, this is by far the longest part of the Summa.
Which really surprised me. I thought a theology book would be, 80% about God. But the biggest section is about us.
It's about human action. It's about morality, virtues, vices, law, grace. This is the roadmap of how the rational creature walks back toward its creator. It's the practical guide to the journey home.
So it's not just abstract theory, it's applied ethics and psychology.
Absolutely. It's a manual for living.
And part 3, where does that fit in the circle?
Part 3 is the means of that return. Because here's the catch in the Christian worldview. We can't just walk back on our own power.
The gap is too wide.
The gap's too wide. We need a bridge. Part 3 deals with Christ and the sacraments. Christ is the way, the path, and the sacraments are the tools or the vehicle for the journey.
It's amazing. It's like a great circle. You start with God, you go out into the universe and humanity, and then through moral action and with the help of Christ, you loop all the way back to God.
It is. The end is the beginning. And it's worth noting that this structure has deep roots. It reflects a Neoplatonic influence, this ancient philosophical idea of emanation and return.
Right.
But Aquinas completely Christianizes it.
How so? Because Neoplatonism is usually about this impersonal one that just overflows, right? Like a fountain that can't help but spill over.
Exactly. In Neoplatonism, the exit is necessary and automatic. It's almost a physical process. But for Aquinas, the exodus is a free, deliberate act of creation by a personal, loving God.
And the return.
The Reditus isn't just absorption back into some cosmic blob. It's a personal return through love and knowledge. It's about entering into a relationship, not just completing a physics equation.
So we have the blueprint. We have this circular journey, but now we need to look at the bricks and mortar because the Summa isn't written in chapters like a normal book. It's written in these units called articles. And honestly, the first time I read one, I was completely confused. He seems to argue against himself constantly.
The article, the microscopic unit of the Summa. This is where the genius of his methodology really shines.
It's a lost art, almost.
And frankly, it's a method of thinking that we have largely lost today to our detriment. I mean, we live in an age of echo chambers. Aquinas lived in an age of dialectic.
Let's break down exactly how an article works, because it's the same format thousands and thousands of times over. It starts with a question.
Always a specific inquiry. For example, let's look at the very beginning. Question 1, Article 1. Is it necessary to have another doctrine besides the philosophical disciplines?
Which is basically, do we even need theology, or is science and philosophy enough?
Exactly. A very bold question to start a theology book with. He puts his entire profession on trial right at the start.
He's justifying his own existence.
He is. But look at what he does next. He doesn't just give his answer. He starts with the objections.
Right. Objection 1, objection 2. And these aren't weak, flimsy arguments, are they?
No, and this is crucial. He doesn't set up straw men, these weak arguments that are easy to knock down. He lifts the strongest, most convincing arguments he can find against his own position.
He steelmans his opponent.
He steelmans them. He might quote Aristotle or scripture taken out of context, or just use brutal common sense logic. He gives the other side its best possible shot.
I love that. It forces you to actually understand the opposing view before you're allowed to even think about tearing it down. It's intellectually honest.
It's an investigation of the truth. He's treating the objector as a partner in the search, not an enemy to be silenced. After the objections, he gives the sed contra.
On the contrary.
This is usually a short quote from an authority like St. Augustine or a verse from the Bible that indicates the general direction of the correct answer. It's the counterweight. It just plants a flag.
Okay, so you have the arguments against and then a quick hint for the argument in favor.
And then finally we get the respondeo. I answer that.
This is the main event.
This is the master's determination. This is where Aquinas lays out his synthesis, his core argument. He resolves the tension that he has just created.
But he doesn't stop there. He has to close the loop.
He has to. He finishes by going back and replying to each objection individually, showing where it went wrong, or, and this is classic Aquinas, showing how it is partially true but misunderstood.
He makes a distinction.
He almost always makes a distinction. In one sense, yes, but in another, more important sense, no.
There is a quote in our sources from Pope John X II, who canonized Aquinas. He said, quote, articulus cripsit, con miracula fecit.
He performed as many miracles as he wrote articles. Considering there are thousands of articles, that is a lot of miracles. But the miracle is really the clarity, the order.
Let's try to apply this. I want to go deeper into that very first issue he tackles. Is theology a science? Because to a modern listener, science means test tubes, physics, empirical data.
Right. Falsifiable hypotheses.
Exactly. If I say theology is a science, people will laugh at me. They'll say, you can't put God in a test tube.
And that is a perfectly valid objection. In fact, that is almost exactly the objection Aquinas raises against himself in the article.
Okay, so let's role play this a bit. I'm the skeptic. I say, look, science proceeds from self-evident principles. I can see that 2 + 2 = 4. I can observe that fire burns. These are starting points we can all agree on.
Right. The principles are known by the natural light of the intellect.
But theology proceeds from faith, from articles of the creed. I can't see the Trinity. I can't prove it from reason alone. So theology is not a science. It's just opinion. It's a belief system.
That is a strong argument. Aristotle would agree with you 100%. A science needs to be based on things we know are true, not just believe.
So how does Aquinas get out of that? How does he defend theology's place in the university?
He makes one of his classic distinctions. He says there are 2 types of sciences. There are sciences that proceed from principles known directly by the natural light of the intellect, like geometry or arithmetic. You know the principles yourself.
Okay, the foundational sciences.
But there are also subaltern sciences.
Subaltern, meaning they sit under another science.
Exactly. They borrow their first principles from a higher science. The example he gives is music.
Music? How is music a science? It feels like art.
Well, think about music theory. When a musician studies harmonies, octaves, and the ratios between notes, they're using mathematical principles.
Okay, yeah, the physics of sound waves.
Right. Now, does the musician stop playing the violin to prove the mathematical theorems of why an octave is an octave?
No, of course not. They just trust that the math works. They accept it.
Precisely. The musician accepts the principles from the mathematician. The science of music is subaltern to the science of mathematics. The musician trusts the mathematician's higher knowledge.
I see exactly where this is going. So the theologian is the musician.
Yes. Theology is a subaltern science. It accepts its principles from a higher science. And what is that higher science?
It can't be a human science. It can't be math or physics.
It isn't. It is the scientia Dei, the knowledge God has of himself. And by extension, the knowledge of the blessed, the saints, and angels who see God face to face.
That is such a cool and unexpected way to flip the argument. So he's saying, yes, you're right. We can't prove the starting points, like the Trinity, with our own math. We can't derive them from first principles.
You're absolutely right about that.
But we accept them on the authority of someone who can see them, God himself who has revealed them.
Exactly. So theology is a science because it proceeds with strict logic from principles that are held to be true. It's just that we didn't figure out the principles ourselves. They were revealed to us.
It grounds theology not in feeling or opinion, but in what he considers to be the ultimate source of knowledge in the universe.
Yes, the knowledge held by the Creator. It makes theology a valid intellectual discipline without claiming it's the same thing as physics. It gives it a place at the university table.
And it shows that faith isn't irrational. It's maybe super rational. It's above reason, but it's not against it.
That's the whole project in a nutshell.
So we have the method, we have the architecture. Now let's step into the cathedral proper. Part 1, the foundation, Judeo, on God.
This is where we start the exodus, the journey out.
Yeah.
But Aquinas makes a very important distinction right at the gate, before he even gets going. He divides this study into 2 sections.
Okay.
Deo uno, God is one, and Deo trino, God is Trinity.
Why separate them? Why not just talk about God?
Because he believes we can know certain things about God through natural reason alone. Anyone, even a pagan philosopher like Aristotle, could reason their way to the existence of a first cause, an unmoved mover.
That's Deo uno, the God of the philosophers.
Exactly. We can know that God exists and certain things about his nature, like his unity, his eternity, his goodness, just by looking at the world.
But the Trinity...
That is purely a matter of revelation. Reason alone could never, ever guess that God is 3 persons in one substance. If God hadn't told us, we would never know. So he treats the philosophical God first, then the revealed God.
So he starts with and. Does God exist? We have the famous 5 ways in question 2. But immediately after establishing existence, he asks, quid sit, what is God?
And the answer, very humbly, is we don't know.
That seems like a bit of a letdown after proving he exists. He's there, but I can't tell you anything about him.
It's what's called the via negativa, the negative way. Aquinas says we cannot know what God is in his essence because he is infinite and we are finite. Our minds are like cups, and he is the ocean. You can't put the ocean in a cup.
Good analogy.
So we mostly know him by what he is not. He's not material, he is not changing, he is not in time, and most importantly, he is not composed of parts.
That last one, simplicity, seems to be a really big deal for Aquinas. God is simple, but when I hear simple, I think dumb or basic.
A modern language trap. For Aquinas, simple means not composed, not a compound. Think about a Lego castle. It's complex. It's made of 1,000 different parts. But because it's made of parts, it can be taken apart. It can be destroyed. And more importantly, you need a builder to put the parts together. The blocks existed before the castle.
So if God had parts, something would have to come before God to assemble him.
Exactly. If God were composed of parts like matter and form, or existence and essence, he would depend on those parts. And he would depend on whatever builder put him together. He wouldn't be the first cause, he'd be a secondary effect.
So God can't be a Lego castle. He has to be a single, unbroken monolith.
Even more basic than that.
Yeah.
He has to be pure act, pure being itself. He doesn't have existence. He is existence. He doesn't have goodness. He's goodness. In God, essence and existence are the same thing.
It's mind-bending. But if he is this simple, monolithic unity, how on earth do we get to the Trinity? This seems like an impossible problem.
It's the central problem.
If he's not made of parts, how can he be 3 persons? Doesn't 3 immediately imply parts? A father part, a son part, a spirit part.
This is where the expert in Aquinas really has to just marvel at his intellectual precision. He saves the Trinity from being a logical contradiction by using the concepts of processions and relations.
Okay, lay this on me gently. Processions. What is a procession?
A procession is an origin, a coming forth of one thing from another. Aquinas says there are processions within God that don't go outside of God. They are immanent activities.
Okay, an internal coming forth.
Think of your own mind. When you understand something, say you understand the concept of a tree, you generate an inner word, a concept of verbum mentis in your mind.
Okay, I have the image of a tree in my head, a concept of treeness.
That concept is distinct from the act of you thinking, but it stays inside your mind. It's not a physical tree out in the yard. Now, scale that up to infinity. God understands himself perfectly, completely in one eternal act.
Right.
That perfect understanding, the inner word of God, is so perfect and substantial that it is another person. The Son, it's a procession of intellect.
So the Father thinks of himself, and that thought is so perfect, so complete, that it is itself a subsistent person, the Son.
Exactly. That is the first procession. The second is an act of the will, love.
Mm-hmm.
When you know yourself and you see that you are good, you love yourself. In God, the love between the Father who knows and the Son who is known, that love proceeds as a person, the Holy Spirit.
An eternal procession of love.
Right. And these processions lead to relations.
Relations.
Yes. The Father is related to the Son as Father. The Son is related to the Father as Son. They are defined by their relationship. Now, here is the genius move. Aquinas argues that because God is simple, these relations aren't just accidental properties like stickers stuck onto God.
What are they then?
They are the persons.
Wait, explain that. That's a jump.
In a human, a relationship is something you have. You have a relationship with your mother. You are a son or a daughter. But if your mother died, you would still be you. The relationship is not your substance.
Right, it's an attribute.
In God, the persons are subsistent relations. The Father is the paternity. The Son is the filiation. They are nothing but their relationship to the other persons. Without their relationship, they wouldn't exist as distinct persons.
So they are distinct in their relationship to each other.
But they are absolutely one in their substance, their essence, their being.
That is incredibly subtle. It allows him to hold on to radical monotheism, one simple substance, while still explaining how there can be a real distinction of three persons.
It protects the mystery without trying to dissolve it into a contradiction.
I want to bring in one of our other sources here, Cardinal Newman. He talks about the development of this doctrine because the early Christians, the fishermen, the martyrs, they didn't use all this technical language, right?
Oh, of course not.
They didn't walk around talking about subsistent relations and processions.
No, they didn't. And Newman's essay on the development of Christian doctrine is a vital companion piece here. He points out that the ante-Nicene fathers, the very early ones before the big councils, might not have used a precise word like consubstantial.
So did Aquinas just invent this stuff hundreds of years later?
No. This is Newman's whole point. He argues that the kernel of the truth, the idea, was always there from the beginning. The idea was lived, prayed, and experienced in the life of the church. They worshiped Jesus as God. They prayed to the Holy Spirit.
So the belief was there, but not the vocabulary.
Exactly. The technical language, the theology, developed over time, usually in response to a crisis or a heresy. It was a defense mechanism.
So when someone like Arius came along in the 4th century and said, Jesus is just a creature, the first and greatest creature, but not God.
The church had to get technical. They had to find a word to make it absolutely clear. No, he is homoousios consubstantial, of the very same substance as the Father.
So the technical language is like a fence built around a garden.
That's a perfect image. The fence isn't the garden, but it protects the garden from being trampled. Newman makes a beautiful distinction between theology and religion.
Oh, I liked that part of the source material.
He says theology deals with the notional or the systematic like, the Trinity as a formal dogma. It's an intellectual framework. But religion deals with devotion to the specific persons.
The actual practice.
Yes, you pray to the Father. You ask Jesus for help. You invoke the Holy Spirit. That's the lived reality.
So Aquinas gives us the system, the theology, to protect and clarify the devotion, the religion.
Exactly. The Summa is the walls of the cathedral that protect the altar where the actual prayer happens.
That leads us perfectly into the next phase of the Exodus. We move from God in himself to God's action, the framework of reality, creation and creatures.
God acts, and the first act outside of the Trinity is creation.
And the key term here, the non-negotiable for Aquinas, is ex nihilo.
From nothing.
From absolute nothing.
This is crucial. God didn't take some pre-existing cosmic mud or energy and shape it like a sculptor. He produced the whole being of the universe from absolute non-existence.
Which means that for Aquinas, God isn't just a clockmaker who built the clock, wound it up, and walked away.
Right, that's deism. And Aquinas is no deist. He teaches that creation is a constant ongoing act. If God stopped thinking about you for 1 nanosecond, you wouldn't die. You would vanish. You would cease to exist.
You'd just pop back into the nothingness you came from?
Exactly. Creation is the constant holding of things in being over the abyss of nothingness. It's an act of continuous love.
That's both a terrifying and a comforting thought at the same time. Now, moving down the hierarchy of being, we hit the angels. Questions 50 to 64.
Pure spirits, no bodies, pure intellects.
I found this section on the devil really interesting based on the source material, referencing Aquinas' other work, De Malo, on evil. I always had this cartoonish image that the devil wanted to be God. like literally take his throne.
Aquinas says that's impossible, and the devil would know it's impossible. An angel is an incredibly intelligent being. He knows he is a creature. He knows he can never be the uncreated creator. He's not stupid.
So what was his sin then, if not trying to usurp God's nature?
It was pride, but a very specific kind of pride. Aquinas says the devil sinned by desiring a false equality with God, not in nature, but in rule and self-sufficiency.
In rule, what does that mean?
He wanted to attain his final happiness and beatitude by his own power. He didn't want to receive it as a gift from God's grace. He wanted to be the CEO of his own existence, the master of his own destiny.
He wanted to say, I did this, I achieved this on my own.
I don't need God's help. That sounds uncomfortably human, doesn't it? That's the self-made man ethos carried to its ultimate metaphysical extreme.
It is. It is the essence of all sin. I will do it my way. My will be done rather than thy will be done.
And from that pride flows envy and the desire to drag others down into that same state of self-imposed misery.
Then we move from the purely spiritual to the corporeal world, the physical stuff.
The work of distinction and adornment, as he calls it, based on the 6 days of Genesis.
And finally, we get to the creature that is the horizon of the spiritual and the physical. Man. Questions 75 to 102.
The microcosm. We contain everything below us. We have the mineral world in our bones, the vegetative world in our growth, the animal world in our senses, and the spiritual world in our intellect and will. Yeah. We are the bridge.
And Aquinas is very, very firm that we are not just souls trapped in bodies, like a ghost in a machine.
No. That is Platonism or Gnosticism, and he rejects it completely. For Aquinas, following Aristotle, the soul is the form of the body.
The form of the body. Unpack that.
The soul is the animating principle. It is what makes the matter of your body a living human body, and not just a pile of chemicals. It's the software that makes the hardware run and gives it its specific identity as human.
So without the soul, the body is just meat, a corpse.
Exactly. But also, and this is just as important, without the body, the human soul is incomplete. You are not a ghost in a machine. You are a composite unity. Your body is an essential part of you.
Which is why Christianity insists on the resurrection of the body at the end of time.
Precisely. Because if we were just souls, heaven would be about disembodied spirits floating around forever. But if we are body-soul composites, we need our bodies back to be fully and truly human again.
Aquinas really respects the physical world. He doesn't hate matter. God made matter. It is good.
Very good. Which brings us to the Reditus, the Great Return, Part 2 of the Summa, the journey back home.
Now, we need to slow down here, you said. This is the part that often gets ignored, but as we said, it's the biggest part of the book.
It is. It's over 1,000 articles. It's about how we actually live.
Moral life.
Yes. But for Aquinas, morality isn't just a list of do's and don'ts from a rule book.
Yeah.
It's about movement. It's about our final end, which is happiness with God. And it's about habits.
We have to talk about habits, because today a habit is usually a bad thing, like biting your nails or mindlessly checking your phone. It's an unconscious rut.
Right. For us, a habit is a rut. For Aquinas, a habitus is a superpower. It is a stable quality of the soul. It's a modification of your very nature that gives you the power to act easily, joyfully, and well.
So a virtue is a good habit, a good habitus.
Exactly. Think of learning to play the piano. At first, it's brutally hard. You have to think about every finger. You're clumsy, you're slow, it sounds awful.
I remember it well.
But if you practice, if you repeat the act over and over, you build a habit, a habitus. And suddenly, you can play a concerto fluidly, joyfully, and accurately without even thinking about your fingers.
You have the habit of piano playing. It has become second nature.
Exactly. Virtue is the same. At first, telling the truth when a lie is easier is hard. Being brave when you're scared is hard. But if you practice it, you build the virtue of truthfulness, the virtue of courage. You become a truthful person. You become a brave person.
And this is where we can integrate another one of our sources, St. Josemaria Escrivá. He uses some great, very earthy metaphors for this interior construction. He talks about living stones.
Yes. If the Summa is an intellectual cathedral, Escrivá reminds us that the Reditus happens in the real-world construction of a spiritual temple within each person.
In the source text, he quotes St. Peter about us being living stones built into a spiritual house. And St. Augustine saying we are being hewed and shaped in this life to be dedicated in the next.
It connects perfectly with Aquinas' idea of virtue. How do you shape a stone? You don't ask it politely. You take a hammer and a chisel to it. You chip away the rough edges.
So the chipping is the repetition of virtuous acts, or is it dealing with suffering?
It's both. It's the daily discipline. But Escrivá really emphasizes that the rubbing against other stones, dealing with annoying people, handling setbacks at work, the friction of daily life, that is what smooths us out and makes us fit into the wall of the temple.
There is also that vivid image from Escrivá's book Camino about the muelle, the spring or the coil.
Yes, the spring that was compressed. He says, don't you see that you were a coil spring that was compressed so that you would jump far?
I love that. It completely reframes pressure and difficulty.
It's a physics analogy for the interior life. Aquinas would talk about the irascible appetite, the part of the soul that fights through difficulty to achieve a good. Escrivá just calls it the compressed spring.
So the more life pushes you down, humiliation, failure, hard work, the more potential energy you store.
But only if you don't break. Only if you have the virtues, the temperance, the fortitude to handle the pressure. If you do, that compression becomes power. You can jump towards God. You can achieve things you never could have done if life had been easy.
It grounds the high theology of Aquinas in such a practical way. The redditors isn't just a cosmic theory. It's you at your desk dealing with a difficult email, feeling that compression, and choosing to act with patience.
That is a living stone being placed.
And the mortar that holds these stones together in the wall, that has to be charity.
It's always charity. For Aquinas, charity is the form of all the virtues.
We have a beautiful source here from Aquinas' commentary on the Psalms. He compares the just man to a tree and the wicked to dust.
This is one of my favorite images in all of Aquinas. It's so simple and so profound. He asks, why does the psalm say the wicked are like dust?
Because they're blown away by the wind.
Yes, but why? Because dust has no cohesion. It is dry. It is divided into tiny particles. Among the proud, he quotes, there are always contentions.
So sin divides, it isolates. Pride turns us into individual grains of dust blowing in the wind, unable to build anything, with no internal unity.
And the just man.
He is like a tree planted by running water.
He has roots, he is stable, and he has moisture, which Aquinas identifies with charity, with love. Love is the water that binds things together. Love makes the leaves stick to the branch and the branch to the trunk. It creates unity.
So the redditus, the return to God, is essentially a movement from being dust, isolated, dry, proud, to being a tree or a temple, united, vital, loving.
Yes, we return to God by becoming united with him and with our neighbors through the cohesive power of love. That is the destination of the circle.
It's beautiful. But we also have to look at the critical side, because not everyone just accepted Aquinas immediately. And even Aquinas himself. Well, there's the famous story of the end of his life.
The straw comment.
Yes.
Yes. This is absolutely crucial for perspective. Aquinas spent his whole life building this cathedral of words. But in December 1273, he suddenly stopped writing. He was almost done with part 3.
What happened?
He was celebrating Mass, and he had a profound mystical experience. We don't know exactly what he saw. But afterwards, his secretary and friend, Reginald of Paperno, begged him to continue. Master, the work is unfinished. All of Christendom is waiting for it.
And what did he say?
And Thomas just said, Reginald, I can do no more. Such things have been revealed to me that all that I have written seems to me as so much straw.
Sicut palia. Straw.
Imagine that. The Summa Theologica, the greatest intellectual achievement of the Middle Ages, maybe of all time. And the author calls it straw.
Does that mean it was worthless? Was he saying I wasted my time?
No, I don't think so. Think about what straw is. In the Middle Ages, straw wasn't worthless. It was used to pack fragile things for shipping. It was used to bed down animals. It has a function,
Okay.
but it is not the grain. It is not the food itself.
So the words, the concepts, the theology, it's all the straw that protects the grain of truth, the reality of God.
Exactly. Compared to the direct vision of God, theology is just dry grass. But for us, here on earth, still on the journey, we need the straw. We need the concepts to hold the mystery without breaking it.
Newman has a great defense of this straw, or this intellectual complexity, doesn't he? In the source material on the illative sense. He argues against those who say we should just have a simple feeling faith without all the intellectual structure.
Yes, Newman asks a very practical question. How do we actually know things? How do we arrive at certitude? We don't usually have mathematical proof for the most important things in life.
You can't prove mathematically that your spouse loves you. You can't prove mathematically that Napoleon existed.
So how do we know? How do we move from a collection of hints and probabilities to being certain? Newman calls it the illative sense. It's the mind's ability to see a convergence of probabilities. Think of a courtroom trial.
Okay.
You have a fingerprint. You have a motive. You have a witness testimony. You have CCTV footage. None of those things alone proves guilt 100%.
Right, each could be explained away.
But when you bundle them all together, when they all point in the same direction.
The jury reaches a verdict beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly. That is the illative sense at work. It takes these separate, weak strands and weaves them into a cable that is strong enough to hold the weight of conviction. Newman says the Summa, with its thousands of articles, is like Aquinas weaving that cable for us.
So the philosophical arguments for God, the history of Scripture, the testimony of the saints, the coherence of the doctrine, they are all individual strands in the cable.
Yes. And the Summa provides the intellectual structure that allows the mind to see the convergence and rest in certitude. It shows that faith isn't a blind leap in the dark. It's a resting in the light of 1,000 converging pieces of evidence.
And speaking of handling complex texts and finding that evidence, we have that advice from St. Jerome in our sources regarding reading the theologian Origen.
Yes, Origen.
Yeah.
A brilliant early theologian, but he went off the rails on some pretty major things. He thought souls pre-existed their bodies, which the church later condemned as heretical.
So did Jerome say, cancel him, burn the books, he's problematic?
No, that's a modern reaction. Jerome said, read Origen like we read others. Choose what is good and avoid the contrary.
It's the same method Aquinas used throughout the Summa.
It is the exact same method. Aquinas quotes Aristotle constantly, calling him the philosopher, even though Aristotle was a pagan who didn't believe in creation, ex nihilo, or a personal God.
He quotes Jewish scholars like Maimonides. He quotes Islamic scholars like Avicenna and Averroes.
He doesn't care who said it. He only cares if it's true. He believed that truth is truth no matter who speaks it, because all truth ultimately comes from God, the Holy Spirit.
It's a model of critical thinking, not cancellation. You don't cancel the author, you sift the text. You keep the gold, you leave the silt.
A lesson we could probably stand to relearn today.
I would say so. Which brings us to the conclusion of our journey through the cathedral.
We have traveled from the boredom and confusion of the medieval student to the grand, ordered, circular plan of the Summa.
We've seen the Exodus God creating the universe, angels, and man, all flowing from him as the source.
And the readiness man returning to God through virtue, charity, and ultimately through Christ.
We've looked at the tool, the incredible dialectical method of the article that forces us to listen to objections before we speak.
We've seen how habits are the muscles of the soul, and how charity is the sap that gives life to the tree of justice.
So here's the big question for the listener. So what? Why does a dense 13th century book matter to someone driving to work in the 21st century? Why should I care about divine simplicity or subaltern science?
I think it matters because we are drowning in information and starving for wisdom, just like those medieval students were. We have endless data, but we lack order. We lack a sapiential view, a wisdom view that sees how it all connects.
We have all the bricks, but no blueprint.
Exactly. The Summa offers a model for thinking clearly in a chaotic world. It teaches us a method. Define your terms. Listen to the objection. Find the crucial distinction. And see everything in relation to the center, which for Aquinas is God.
It connects the dots. It shows that physics, creation, and psychology, virtue, and spirituality, grace, are not separate, walled-off departments. They're all part of one coherent reality.
And it reminds us that faith and reason are friends, not enemies. In a world that often tries to force a choice between being religious and being rational, Aquinas stands there and says, no, that is a false choice. They are the two wings of the human spirit. You need both to fly.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought, something that struck me while reading the section on God's knowledge. We talked about question 1, asking if God is the subject of this science, theology.
Yes, God is the subject matter.
But if God is the subject and we're the students studying him, there is a flip side to that. In this science, the student-us is actually being studied by the subject God.
That is a profound point. The Summa is an attempt to imitate God's knowledge. It tries to see things subspecie eternitatis under the aspect of eternity.
So when you read it, or even when you just think about this grand circular structure, you are trying to put on God's glasses for a moment. You are trying to see your life, your stress, your job, your spring being compressed from his perspective.
And from that perspective, maybe the dust of distraction and pride blows away, and the solid tree of charity and purpose remains.
And that is a perspective worth diving into. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Summa Theologica. If you're feeling brave, maybe pick up just one article today. Question 2, Article 3, the 5 ways, is a classic starting point. See if you can decode the objection and the reply.
You might just find a small miracle of clarity waiting for you.
Until next time.